In today's weather, Hurricane Beryl weakens to a tropical storm and crosses the Yucatan Peninsula. Next stop, Texas. We'll cover that in just a moment, but first let's see what's happening across North America. And we'll start out with that surface analysis. We've got a baroclinic weather system in the western Great Lakes. Located right here, you can see that cyclonic turning in the wind field and a difference in the temperatures of the air mass, 60s up north and 70s and 80s down south. In fact, we can isolate the polar air. There it is up there in the northern plains, the central plains. Temperatures down into the 70s in Oklahoma and even 67 degrees in rain-cooled air in Wichita Falls, Texas. We've also got the tropical air located right there all the way from the northeastern U.S. down to Texas. So that's going to be the tropical air dew points, mostly in the 70s. We've also got some monsoon moisture across Old Mexico. It has been scoured out to a certain extent in Arizona. Dew points have fallen off into the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And we've also got the interior continental air that extends across all of the southwest and on up into California. Dew points in that region rather dry, down into the teens, and some very warm temperatures up to 115. That's going to be around Lake Havasu City and 110 at Baker. There's a look at the northeastern region. This afternoon we've got heat advisories all up the east coast into New York City. Let's take a look at those temperatures. As we record this, we've got upper 90s all through Virginia, 98 degrees at Richmond, 97 at Washington, D.C., and 90s all the way up to southern Pennsylvania. We have had severe thunderstorms throughout much of West Virginia. Severe thunderstorm watch was out earlier this afternoon. Very little of it left except for that area east of Beckley and around Bluefield. Just pretty much a large mass of disorganized thunderstorms at this time. A new round of convection out there around Huntington. In the southeastern states, a massive area of heat advisories all the way from the Carolinas back towards Louisiana and into Texas. Those heat indexes near 110 degrees. Raleigh, North Carolina, located right up here, they broke their all-time warmest temperature this afternoon, 106 degrees. Thunderstorms now interrupting that heat wave. They're down into the 90s. This afternoon, Fayetteville, Charlotte, and Greenville, I think that's located about right there, they all reached 101 degrees, setting a record for the date. Taking a look at Texas, we've got a rare visitor, a strong polar front making its way into East Texas and the central part of the state. Very easy to pick out where that is, and you can see the thunderstorm activity in the wake of that front across the frontal transition zone, where there's a little bit of enhanced lift as that residual moisture becomes unstable and reaches its LFC. There's another cluster of convection around Texarkana and Shreveport. Down to the south, not really anything to get thunderstorms going, but in the Davis Mountains and the Sacramento Mountains, thunderstorms going up. Pretty widespread there, associated with that afternoon heating. And let's take a look at the temperatures. We do have heat advisories throughout much of deep East Texas and the Houston area due to heat indexes near 110. I don't know if that's valid, that 101 out there. That's around maybe Tenaha out there in East Texas. But elsewhere, widespread upper 90s, the hottest temperature that looks legitimate is probably 100. That's going to be around Seguin and Gonzales. I'm not sure of all those cities. But man, look at those temperatures up to the north around Fort Worth, down to 67 and rain-cooled 62. We got to find out where that is. Stephenville, 62 degrees. Wow. That is amazing. In the northern plains, we can see much of that area is in the postfrontal air mass. A little bit of residual moisture on the backside across Wisconsin. But definite evidence of an upper-level low that appears to be centered around Madison. And with that, some cold core convection going up across Wisconsin, eastern Iowa, and around Rockford. Some rather pleasant conditions, 60s and lower 70s across much of that region. And you can see all those showers from northern Wisconsin all the way down towards northeastern Iowa. The southwestern U.S., yeah, this is an ongoing problem area. 120 degrees at Blythe and Needles, and we've got 110 there at Las Vegas. So the temperatures are coming up, and they are expected to get worse as we go into the weekend. The San Joaquin Valley not exempted, temperatures up to 100. 105 in some areas, and yesterday daily records were set in a few cities. We had 110 yesterday at Palmdale. Madera, somewhere around here, got up to 109. Merced and Stockton, 108. Red Bluff, 107. Bishop, 107. Those were daily records, and San Francisco got up to 87. Today, though, look at that, 115. Is that Red Bluff or Redding? That's going to be Redding. I don't know if that's a record. Let's take a look. The record is 118, so we got to do a little bit better than that. It's pretty strange that this all-time extreme of 118, that's hotter than Las Vegas. So they do get some extreme heat in those areas, and probably that's going to be in part due to downsloping, which always warms things up by a few degrees. We can see that the monsoon activity is definitely backed off a little bit. A few showers and storms around Mount Lemmon, right there around Tucson, and down around Douglas, but not much extent up into the Mogollon Rim. See how it's pretty much devoid. Even got a wildfire plume breaking out in some areas. And there's another one in Utah. Otherwise, clear skies across that region, and that's evidence of a large subtropical high. We're going to look at that shortly. In the northwestern region, heat wave as well. Medford got up to 105 yesterday. Mount Shasta City, 98 degrees. Excessive heat warnings are in effect for the Willamette Valley, the coastal range. Portland looking for 100 to 105 through Monday. Medford, 100 to 115 with a red flag warning due to the wildfire risk. Excessive heat warnings throughout the Washington interior, parts of the northern Oregon area as far east as Lewiston and Spokane through next Friday. So this is going to be a prolonged event. Excessive heat watches in the remainder of Oregon and into Idaho. Okay, hopefully everybody caught all that. Showers and storms throughout Montana. They're on the other side of the Continental Divide, and they're getting some of that cool Canadian air. And we head west and on up into British Columbia. Some heat in the interior up to 84 degrees. They do have a heat warning across the interior of western British Columbia. That's going to include Campbell River, Bella Coola, and Terrace, where temperatures could reach 90 degrees. No warnings in effect right now for eastern British Columbia, so the heat wave probably will be a little bit limited. Alaska looking much cooler. Forgot to put the precipitation on there, but temperatures are in the 50s with widespread rain from the Brooks Range into Yukon. Looking rather calm today. In Canada, we've got severe thunderstorm warnings in parts of Manitoba. It's dropped down south. That's going to be in this area around Lake Winnipegosis near Kettlestones Provincial Park. They were looking for wind and hail. Heat warnings in effect through the weekend for Moosonee, Moose Factory out through this region. Temperatures expected to get up to 84 with overnight lows of 64. Doesn't sound like much, but keep in mind the houses there are heavily insulated, which means it's very hard to get rid of that heat. Severe thunderstorm warnings for Britt, Ontario. That's going to be somewhere around right in there. And the Maritimes under severe thunderstorm watches and warnings ahead of this warm front in Maine. And an honorable mention up there in Elamir Island. Warm conditions, 52 degrees, and winds gusting to 33 miles an hour. They have a wind warning for today. Let's take a look at that upper level chart. This is actually 500 millibars. This is about 18,000 feet. There's that high pressure area in northwestern California. So that's co-located with that heat wave taking place on the west coast. northwesterly flow from the northern Rockies down into the central plains. That's helping to support that frontal boundary across parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and a separate stream further north in northern Canada. Let's look at conditions over the weekend, and you'll see that there's just not much change. A large long-wave trough across the central U.S., ridging on the west coast, and we're going into Saturday and Sunday. You can see the circulation associated with Hurricane Beryl, which will be coming on shore in Texas on Monday. Then going into the rest of the week, long wave ridge starts to move a little bit to the east into the Rockies, the long wave trough moving into the East Coast region. And we get to the very end of the period, looks like a rather stagnant weather picture, ridging out west and troughing out east, which means warm weather in the western half of the country and cool weather, maybe broken by a little bit of tropical heat, but maybe some relief here and there as we go into next weekend. Okay, now to discuss the big elephant in the room, Tropical Storm Beryl. And I saved this for last, so we're looking at the latest data. But that's the visible satellite imagery. No evidence of an eye. The circulation has been disrupted by the frictional effects on the peninsula, and it's moving out into the Gulf of Mexico. Let's look at the infrared imagery. Here we can see things a little bit more clearly, looking at the thermal characteristics of the cloud tops. You can see the center of the circulation right around here. Cloud tops look a little bit on the warm side, but it will start regathering strength as it moves out over the warmer waters. Let's look at the Dvorak imagery. Yeah, how do people type on these things? I don't understand it. Oh yeah, the other Dvorak imagery. And this shows that the storm has lost a lot of that symmetry and very cold cloud tops that we had back on Wednesday. We're pretty much starting to lose the enhancement as well. Pretty much a large, disorganized, central dense overcast area with lots of breaks throughout the center. And you do see a little bit of spiraling indicating the structure, but this is definitely a low-end tropical cyclone. But we're going to see that strengthen as it comes back over the waters. This is our detrimental effects chart, the blue corresponding to areas of high shear. When you start getting over 20 to 25 knots, that's an indicator that the tropical cyclone is going to have problems. Now, this did pass Jamaica with a lot of strength, and it did overcome a lot of issues with shear, but that shear that we have out there in the Gulf is quite strong, up to 40 knots. And as we can see, going into Saturday and Sunday, it's going to be plowing right into that 40 to 50 knot shear, so that will have an effect on the strength by disrupting that circulation. And there we can see it coming on the Texas Gulf Coast around Port Aransas and on up into Victoria and up towards College Station and Tyler. That's the current deterministic track. So here's another experimental product. This shows where we're at right now. That's that tropical storm. And as we go forward through tonight and into tomorrow, you can see that moving west-northwest towards the South Texas coast. Landfall is going to be right around here. That's going to be 9Z Monday, so they're projecting that to be about 4 in the morning. But I saw that NHC was going a little bit slower with that. In any case, that will be moving into Texas itself and slowing down. NHC is looking for a 6-mile-an-hour movement, so certainly some potential for some heavy rains and flooding with that prolonged precipitation event. Let's take a look at the QPF graphics. This is from the Weather Prediction Center. This is showing a wide swath of yellow, indicating 4-inch amounts, with scattered 6-inch amounts, that's going to be that orange shading, and some isolated amounts up to 8 inches. Of course, this is provisional depending on whether the GFS verifies, but that is it, the current track on up from Corpus Christi to Houston and to Texarkana. So let's start out with the official NHC graphics. We've got 65 miles an hour sustained. It will remain a tropical storm all the way through tomorrow and into tomorrow night. And we're expecting strengthening into an upper Category 1 hurricane as it approaches the Texas coast. And let's take a look at our objective forecasting tools, starting with the official NHC forecast. That's going to be that thick line, and the adjusted NHC forecast track that's going a little bit further to the west. And as you saw back on Wednesday, we add all the spaghetti components in a very orderly manner. You don't just throw everything up on there. That's a very bad way to forecast. So what do we look at next? We'll look at the GFS. So here with the thick red line, we've got the late cycle GFS, and then we have the adjusted GFS with the thin line. So now we've got a couple very good benchmark tracks. Here we've got the Global Ensemble Forecast System, the GEFS. This is basically the GFS run at lower resolution with different perturbations, adjusting the atmosphere a little bit differently each time. The best clustering, that does appear to be right there around Port Aransas. And you'll see that blue line right there. That's going to be the control member. That's basically the low resolution GFS without any perturbations. So that's where all of the other ensemble members start from. And that's pretty close to the track of the GFS itself. And rather than looking at that mess of spaghetti, you can look at the mean position of all 30 members. And that's going to be that green line, pretty much falling right on that deterministic track. A European data is encumbered with many restrictions, so we have to go to pivotal weather to look at that track. And that appears to come inside the GFS forecast. In other words, it's going to the right a little bit, pretty much right into Port Lavaca. Okay, that's significant. So let's go back to the spaghetti graphics. So that track is going to run something like this. The UK Met model falling a little bit to the left. That's going to be that aqua line coming right into Corpus Christi and on up into East Texas. And I'll quickly go to the consensus models. This is kind of like the superstars, the best models available. And NHC works out what those are every year, and they adjust the weights and the composition of those consensus models. And you can see right there, most of these are going inside the track of the GFS, so a little bit of bias towards the ECMWF results. And that does indicate that there could be a continued eastward shift in the track, so we'll have to kind of watch that going into tonight. Well, we might as well take a look at that precipitable water, widespread 2-inch amounts all the way from the northeastern U.S. into East Texas, and drier air up in the northern plains associated with that cold air advection. Going into the weekend, that cold air does take its toll on the moisture across the Midwest, still hanging on to 2-inch amounts in the Gulf Coast region, and then of course Beryl comes up into Texas, bringing 2 to 3-inch precipitable water amounts. And there's a pretty good plume going into the lower Mississippi River Valley, so plenty of potential for precip along into the right of the track of those tropical storm remains. Okay, plenty of moisture going into the end of next week, not moving north very much. And then going into next weekend, not much change. 2 to 2.5-inch amounts all along the eastern Gulf Coast region. A little bit of drying there in Texas, probably due to the proximity effect with that upper level ridge shifting to the east. So let's look at that forecast, and I ask that you look at your favorite area. I may not be able to get to it, but you can check it out for yourself to see what's going on. I want to go ahead and move this along and get the video uploaded so everybody can see what's going on with the hurricane. All right, we've got this stationary front through Texas. As we mentioned, those showers back behind it, and that's gradually going to slow down. Probably not going to recede north because we're going to have a little bit of a northerly component as Beryl approaches. Up to the north, the other part of that frontal system moving into the northeastern U.S., and this other segment of that frontal system in Utah, Arizona, Nevada, getting modified heavily and mixing out what's left of that boundary. So going into the weekend, here's how things look. As we mentioned, sweltering weather out in the western U.S. The heat peaks in Medford with 113 degrees. A slight risk for the central plains, centered on Grand Island, Goodland, and Garden City, primarily for the potential for baseball-sized hail and high winds. The activity could consolidate into an MCS overnight. And you can see overnight, looks like some sort of MCS moving through central Kansas. Then we go into Sunday, even more heat for the western U.S. There's the hurricane lurking down to the south of the Texas coast. Maybe I'll shift this up a little bit so you can see better. There you go. Sunday, the Weather Service has backed off on that 118 at Vegas. They're now looking at 116. That's going to be a degree below the all-time record. The heat wave peaks at Portland on Sunday with 103 and 100s expected all the way through Tuesday. A slight risk in Oklahoma and up in southern Kansas near this warm front. Another round of heating will produce chances for hail and high winds. Dodge City, Pratt, Enid, Oklahoma City, you'll want to be paying attention to the weather. We go into Monday, you can see that active front right there coming together overnight, so lots of precip chances during the overnight hours. And then this is how we're looking on Monday. Hurricane Beryl coming inland. Currently looks like a high-end Category 1 storm, but, we'll continue to watch that. Monday, we're going to see a mini heat wave across the northeastern U.S. Highs will include 91 at Burlington, 89 at New York City, 90 at Albany, and 92 at, it's going to be right there at Pittsburgh. A cool morning across the northern plains, some more cool air filtering south. We're going to start out with temperatures in the 50s around Denver, Nebraska, western Kansas, afternoon highs in the low 80s. And that heat continues in the southwestern U.S. Tucson peaks at 110. Phoenix up to 114 for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. 700 millibar temperatures up to 20 Celsius. And at 500 millibars, temperatures about -4 to -6. Then we go into Tuesday. The remains of Beryl move into north and east Texas, affecting Dallas, Tyler, and Waco. Then here's the map on Tuesday afternoon. The remains of Beryl still there in Texas. Looking for another hot day in the southwestern U.S., up to 117 forecast at Vegas. That would tie their all-time record. Death Valley expected to hit 132, which is close to the record of 134. A cold day for Texas. Northerly flow and lots of clouds. Temperatures will remain in the 80s from Amarillo to Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. Meanwhile, the heat starts rotating north into the northern Great Basin area. Could see the temperatures up to 107 at Pendleton. Their all-time record is 119, so no major records expected. Let's go into Wednesday. The remains of Beryl moving into Arkansas. We break the heat wave up in the northeastern U.S., some northwesterly flow starting to set in. The heat wave rotates into the northern Rockies, looking for 104 degrees at Spokane, and another day of cool weather in Texas with northerly flow and lots of clouds. Then we go into Thursday, July 11th. The heat shifts into Montana. A little bit of downslope. We're expecting temperatures up to 101 at Billings and 93 at Kalispell. Continued below normal temperatures in the southeastern and southern plains area. And we'll take you through the rest of the week. Frontal system building up there in the Dakotas. That's going to be a front located right there. That's kind of like a summertime Alberta clipper. You can see that moving south there. We go into Sunday. Looks like the monsoon is starting to make a reappearance there in the lower deserts. And then we go up to Monday, July 15th. Cold air building into the Great Lakes area. That's quite a slug of cold air up there in Ontario and Quebec. And why is the monsoon making a reappearance in the southwest deserts? Well, when you move that upper level high to the east, out into the Rockies, you notice that the flow comes around to the south, and that taps into that deeper moisture down there in Old Mexico. So the very last chart there on the 15th, we've got deep southerly flow starting to return into Arizona and Nevada. And that's it for me. Thank you for joining us with another episode of Forecast Lab. We'll be back here on Monday for the supporters, and that's when the hurricane comes on shore. So if you want to catch that, you'll need to sign up on Patreon. There's the link, and you can get that set up. Otherwise, we'll see you back here on Wednesday. Hope you have a great weekend. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.